The biting wind whipped Rachel Holloway's hair across her face, stinging her cheeks with a cold that promised the harsh winter ahead just the previous day. As Rachel knelt beside Daniel, guiding his small hand, as he attempted to draw a horse in the dust, she had looked up to see Eloise standing on the ranch house porch. Her arms crossed, a perfectly manicured finger tapping her chin. Eloise's gaze wasn't one of casual observation. It was sharp, unwavering, analytical, like a biologist studying an insect before deciding its fate. A faint, almost imperceptible tightening around Eloise's lips had accompanied the look, gone in an instant, replaced by a radiant smile as Jacob stepped out beside her. But the image, the cold calculation in those beautiful eyes, had lingered a silent alarm bell in Rachel's mind. Now that chill had intensified. A deeper, more insidious cold had settled in her heart, a premonition that had been growing ever since Jacob, blinded by infatuation, had brought Eloise, his vibrant, unsettlingly youthful second wife, into their lives, concealed by the flapping sheets on the laundry line. The mundane scent of lye soap, a bizarre counterpoint to the horror unfolding. Rachel had frozen her hands, clutching a damp clothespin so tightly her knuckles ached, as she overheard a low, urgent fragment of conversation. Eloise's voice, sharp and impatient, as a flicked knife was unmistakable, directed at Cain. One of the new, unsettlingly rough ranch hands Jacob had inexplicably hired, on Eloise's insistent recommendation, make sure it looks like an accident. For both of them, if the mother proves troublesome. No loose ends, the wolf paw terrain is treacherous. Even experienced climbers meet their end there. A little slip, a sudden rockfall. Jacob will be devastated, of course, but he'll have me to comfort him, to guide him, and the estate will be secure. An accident. What accident? Both of them. The implication struck Rachel with the force of a physical blow. Did she mean Thomas and Daniel, or Rachel and one of the boys? The words clung to Rachel like ice shards, a vague but potent dread that now felt like a coiled viper in her stomach, its venom already seeping into her veins. She pulled her shawl tighter, the wool suddenly inadequate against the bone-deep chill. Her gaze swept across the vast expanse of the Holloway Ranch, a legacy built by her late father-in-law, Jedediah Holloway. A man whose wisdom and fairness were etched into every fence post, every acre of grazing land. He had taught her so much about the rhythms of the land, the honesty of hard work. It was a good life, a demanding life, but one she cherished above all else. Her two sons, Thomas and little Daniel, were inside the sturdy ranch house. Their laughter, Thomas's thoughtful chuckle, Daniel's infectious giggle, echoing faintly, a warm, vibrant counterpoint to the mournful sigh of the wind. Thomas, at 8, serious and observant, already showed the keen eye and steady hand of a future rancher. Just last week she'd watched him, his small face a mask of concentration, tongue caught between his teeth, stubbornly trying to whittle a new leg for one of his small wooden animal figures, a skill old Jedediah himself had begun to teach him before he passed. A rancher needs to be able to fix what's broken. Son, Jedediah had told Thomas, his voice gruff but kind, with his hands, with his head, and sometimes with his heart. The memory, so sweet now, brought a fresh stab of visceral fear. Daniel, barely 5, was a whirlwind of joyous energy, his mother's constant adoring shadow, always wanting to help with her chores, his small hands eager. They were her world, the rightful heirs to this land, a truth as solid as the granite peaks that framed their valley. But Eloise, with her restless fire and sharp, dazzling beauty that seemed to draw the light to her, saw Rachel and her sons not as family, but as irksome obstacles on her path to absolute control. Childless herself, her ambition was a consuming hunger. For the entirety of the Holloway fortune, Rachel had tried, for Jacob's sake, for the fragile peace of their fractured home, to find common ground, offering polite smiles and small courtesies. But Eloise's smiles were thin as skimmed ice, her courtesies brittle and edged with an almost imperceptible contempt. The insidious whispers had started then emanating from Eloise like a miasma painting. Rachel as old-fashioned her influence, waning perhaps even mentally fragile. Her devotion to her sons a stifling, unhealthy possessiveness. Eloise's bitter comment about her maternal grandfather, a pioneer who'd lost everything he'd built his spirit broken to men like Jedediah Holloway. Shrewd, some might even say ruthless, in their acquisitions during the lean years, now seemed to glow with sinister, almost infernal light. It was clear looking back with the horrifying clarity of her new knowledge that Eloise hadn't just married Jacob. She'd married the Holloway legacy, perhaps, with the dark, twisted intent of enacting a generational revenge, of righting perceived wrongs through means most foul. Rachel imagined Eloise as a child, listening to tales of her grandfather's ruin, his image likely romanticized into that of a noble victim, Jedediah Holloway, cast as the villain. That youthful bitterness, festering over years, had perhaps curdled into the monstrous ambition she now possessed. The family retreat to a remote hunting lodge nestled deep in the Wolfpaw Mountains had been Eloise's idea, presented with such apparent sincerity, such a saccharine desire for them all to bond, that Jacob, desperate for any sign of unity, had readily agreed, dismissing Rachel's grave misgivings. It will be an adventure for the boys. Thomas will love exploring the woods, and little Daniel will be perfectly safe with all of us looking out for him. Eloise had cooed, her eyes shining with a particular light Rachel instinctively profoundly distrusted, and a chance for us all to connect away from the endless pressures of the ranch. Rachel pleaded with Jacob, her voice urgent. The early snows in the high country were notoriously treacherous, near the Wolfpaw Pass, known for sudden violent blizzards. The lodge was dangerously remote days from any real help. But Jacob, eager to please Eloise, perhaps trying to recapture a sense of family unity, he felt slipping away, had waved her concerns away, with that familiar blend of condescension and impatience Eloise had so skillfully nurtured. "Nonsense, Rachel. You fret too much. It will be perfectly safe. We'll have experienced guides. What could possibly go wrong?" The guides. The two brutish men Eloise had procured, one being Cain, the scar-faced man from the overheard conversation, and the other, a hulking, silent brute named Cody, only amplified her burgeoning terror. Their eyes were hard, their manners rough, lacking the quiet competence of true mountain men. On the arduous trail up, Cain had made a crude comment about Rachel's appearance, when Jacob rode ahead momentarily, while Cody, with what seemed like deliberate malice, had allowed his larger horse to crowd Daniel's little pony dangerously close to a steep drop, causing the child to cry out in fear until Rachel spurred her own horse between them. Eloise had merely tutted, "Oh, Daniel, such a sensitive boy." The journey to the mountain lodge was arduous, each upward mile bringing colder air, a more desolate landscape. The boys, initially excited by the prospect of an adventure, grew subdued as the towering snow-dusted peaks loomed, seeming to press in on them. Thomas's keen eyes noted the unsettling lack of game trails and the eerie quiet. Daniel, unusually quiet, buried his face into Rachel's side whenever the wind howled with particular ferocity. The lodge itself was rustic, imposing, its log walls dark and stained the silence of the surrounding forest, profound, almost suffocating. The first evening was strained thick with unspoken tensions, Jacob perhaps sensing the undercurrent, or perhaps already under Eloise's subtle influence, drank more whiskey than usual. His laughter, a little too loud, a little too forced. Eloise was a picture of solicitous concern, bustling about, plying Rachel and the children with mugs of warm, heavily spiced cider. "Drink up," she urged, her voice smooth as honey, yet cloying. "Thomas, Daniel, this will keep you warm and strong for our mountain adventures tomorrow. It's an old family recipe full of mountain goodness." All wary, acutely aware of the overheard threat, and the strange taste of the single sip she'd allowed herself from Jacob's cup earlier, Rachel made a show of enjoying it, then subtly set her mug aside, feigning a sudden cough. But Thomas and Daniel, reassured by Eloise's manufactured warmth and the promise of adventures drank theirs with innocent gusto. Later, as she tucked them into their rough-hewn bunks, Thomas complained of a strange, overwhelming sleepiness, his eyelids heavy. "My head feels fuzzy, Mama." He'd mumbled his small hand, trying to brush away an invisible cobweb from his eyes. "And the room is spinning a bit." Daniel was already fast asleep, his small face unusually pale, and still in the flickering lamplight, a wave of dizziness washed over Rachel herself from that single sip she'd initially taken from Jacob's mug, who had quickly finished his own, a peculiar, insidious lethargy settling into her limbs like lead. The cider. It had to be the cider. A cold dread, sharp and piercing, lanced through Rachel. She looked towards Eloise, who was watching from the doorway, a silhouette against the dim hall light. Eloise's expression was unreadable in the shifting shadows. But Rachel could have sworn she saw a chillingly triumphant glint in her eyes, a subtle curve to her lips that was far from a smile of concern. Her last conscious thought was of Thomas's whittling knife, lying on the small table of Daniel's beloved rag doll, peeking from under his blanket, a desperate primal urge to protect them. A silent scream of "no." Then darkness consumed her. The next thing Rachel knew was a searing, unimaginable cold. It was a physical pain burning through the thick fog in her mind. She was lying on something hard and uneven, sharp rocks and frozen earth pressing into her back, snow biting at her exposed skin, disoriented, gasping. She struggled to sit up, her limbs, heavy, unresponsive. Panic cold and sharp as the ice forming on her lashes clawed at her throat. Where was she? Where were her boys? She blinked, trying to force her eyes to focus through the swirling snow of a full-blown blizzard. The wind howled like a tormented spirit. She remembered the lodge, the cloying cider, Eloise. This was no accident. This was the accident Eloise had plotted. Thomas Daniel. She rasped, her voice barely a whisper against the storm's fury. She crawled, her hands immediately raw and bleeding on the frozen, jagged ground, searching frantically. Then she saw them, two small, still forms, huddled together a few feet away, already dusted with snow. She reached Thomas first. He was so cold, his face a waxy bluish white. "Thomas, wake up. Please, my strong boy, wake up." There was no response. His eyes remained closed, his small chest heartbreakingly still. The world tilted, a silent scream building in her chest, her firstborn, her brave, curious Thomas gone, stolen. The agony was a living thing, tearing her apart. But a flicker of movement from the other small form galvanized her, Daniel Little. Daniel was stirring, a faint whimper escaping his blue-tinged lips. He was alive for now, rage potent and fierce as the blizzard itself surged through Rachel. Eloise would not win as she gathered Daniel's small, limp body. He was terrifyingly cold, but there was a spark, however faint. She had to find shelter. She stumbled onward, her bare feet numb and bleeding, her body screaming in protest, her will iron. Daniel mumbled, his breath a faint mist. "Mama, cold, Tommy. I know, my love, I know Mama will find us a warm place." She lied, her voice choked. The path ahead was blocked by a formidable snowdrift nearly as tall as she was. She had to detour, scrambling and clawing her way through thick, snow-laden brush that tore at her thin nightdress and raked her skin. Each step was agony. Then, through a momentary thinning of the swirling snow, she saw it. A dark smudge against the white, a rock overhang, a shallow cave carved by ancient winds. It wasn't much, but it was something. Summoning her last reserves of strength, she half-carried, half-dragged Daniel towards it, finally collapsing under the overhang, shielding Daniel with her body. She chafed his tiny hands and feet, whispering words of encouragement. The image of Thomas, lying alone in the snow, his vibrant life extinguished, washed over her. A fresh wave of soul-crushing desolation. But she couldn't succumb, not while Daniel still breathed, just as a fragile tendril of hope began to unfurl. A new specific terror emerged. A figure dark and menacing materialized through the swirling snow. Cain. He must have circled back, perhaps sent by Eloise to ensure their demise. He hadn't seen them yet, his head down, pressing Daniel tighter into the shallowest part of the recess, praying they were hidden. Rachel's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird, her numb fingers scrabbling in the loose scree at her feet, closed around a loose, frozen piece of schist, its edges sharp against her palm. It was a pitiful weapon, a desperate thought, but it was action. With a surge of desperate adrenaline born of maternal fury, she lobbed it not directly at him, but a short distance to his left, aiming for a larger outcrop of rocks slightly uphill. The stone struck with a surprisingly loud clack against the other, a sharp report momentarily distinct from the wind's mournful howl. Cain's head snapped up his pistol, already half drawn from beneath his heavy coat, his gaze darting towards the sound, away from their precarious recess. He shouted something lost in the wind. "Anyone there, show yourself, damn you." Then, with a final frustrated sweep of his narrowed eyes that mercifully missed their tiny snow-dusted crevice, he cursed the brutal weather, and his grim task turned and was swallowed by the storm, heading back perhaps to report his failure to find the bodies easily, or more likely to seek his own shelter from the blizzard's escalating fury. The close call left Rachel trembling violently, her hope nearly extinguished, replaced by a chilling certainty. This wasn't just abandonment. It was an active, ongoing hunt. Meanwhile, hours later, strategically timing her arrival with the waning of the storm's initial fury. But while it still raged enough to make her story plausible, Eloise stumbled into the small mining town of Redemption. Her dress was artfully torn, her face expertly smudged with dirt, and what looked like carefully applied dried blood from a small self-inflicted scratch. Her hair was wild, her eyes wide with a meticulously rehearsed terror. She collapsed dramatically into the arms of the first person she saw, the town's burly blacksmith, Jedediah "Jed" Stone, who, despite his gruff exterior, had a soft spot for a damsel in distress, a bear. She sobbed, her voice ragged, breaking pathetically. A monstrous bear. It attacked us. At the lodge. She clung to Jed, her body trembling convincingly. Jacob, he fought it bravely, told us to run. Her story poured out a torrent of calculated lies, perfected in her mind during her own relatively comfortable descent from a prearranged lower point on the mountain after Cain and Cody had done their work and departed. Rachel, the children. We ran in different directions to confuse it. I saw it. I saw it go after Rachel and the boys. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with feigned sobs. I tried to go back. I swear I tried. But the storm, it was so fierce I couldn't find them. I barely made it out alive. The town of Redemption, a close-knit community accustomed to frontier tragedies, was horrified. Bear attacks, though not common, were a known and feared danger. Eloise, young, beautiful, and seemingly traumatized, played her part to perfection. Sheriff Brody, a grizzled veteran of countless such grim reports, his face a roadmap of hard-won experience, organized a search party immediately. Despite the still-raging blizzard, his jaw tight with a familiar frontier stoicism, but a flicker of professional skepticism in his eyes that Eloise didn't catch. Men volunteered readily. Jacob Holloway. When the news reached him back at the ranch, Eloise having sent a frantic message with a rider she providentially encountered. A rider secretly in her pay, who even then pocketed a hefty bonus for speed discretion, and the promise of more for his silence was devastated beyond words. He arrived in Redemption, his face a mask of raw anguish, his eyes hollow pits of despair. Eloise threw herself into his arms, weeping hysterically, recounting her tale, subtly emphasizing her own bravery. Jacob, consumed by grief and a terrible crushing guilt for having insisted on the trip against Rachel's pleas, believed her every word. The search parties braved the blizzard for 2 grueling days. They found signs of a struggle, A broken branch here, a patch of disturbed snow there, even a torn piece of blue fabric that Eloise identified with a fresh burst of tears as being from Rachel's shawl. Details that Eloise's hired men, Kane and Cody, had carefully, if hastily, arranged before their departure. They found no bodies. After 3 days with the weather worsening, Sheriff Brody, his face etched with regret and a lingering unease about the neatness of some of the signs, regretfully called off the search. Rachel Holloway and her 2 young sons were presumed dead. Redemption mourned. A solemn memorial service was held. Jacob was a broken man. Eloise, ever the grieving widow, was a picture of sorrowful composure, slowly, insidiously beginning to fill the void, taking over the running of the Holloway household with an iron fist in a velvet glove. Accompanying Jacob to business meetings, her sharp mind and quick grasp of figures impressing those who had previously dismissed her. She was becoming Mrs. Holloway in name. And in fact, her grandfather's ghost, she imagined, would be pleased. Miles away high in the remote snow-swept highlands of the Wolf Paw Mountains, Sahale, a warrior of the Numunu Comanche nation, moved through the frozen landscape with the silent grace of a hunting wolf. His people had long revered these mountains. He was tracking a small herd of elk when his keen eyes, accustomed to scanning vast distances, caught something incongruous: drag marks. Long, shallow furrows in the snow, partially obscured, but definitely man-made, leading upwards into a desolate area. Curiosity and a hunter's instinct for the unusual pricked at him. He followed them patiently. The trail led him to a sheer rock face, then along its base. He almost missed it, a slight depression in a snowdrift beneath a shallow overhang. There was no obvious sign of life, but a faint, almost imperceptible scent on the wind. Humans faint and overlaid with the harshness of extreme cold and sickness, the scent of life clinging precariously. Drew him closer. Cautiously, he probed the drift with his spear butt. It met something soft. He began to dig carefully. He uncovered a woman, clothes thin and tattered skin. An alarming blue-white curled protectively around a small child. He thought them both dead. Then the woman gasped, a ragged, shallow breath. Her eyes fluttered open, glazed with confusion. The child whimpered a sound so faint it was almost lost, life barely. It was, as he later thought, an impossible thing. A miracle woven by the great spirit Sahale was not given to easy superstition. But he felt a profound sense of awe. He worked with swift, practiced efficiency. He gently cleared the remaining snow. He stripped off Daniel's frozen clothing and wrapped him in the warmest, driest furs he carried. He rubbed the boy's tiny limbs with bear grease mixed with warming herbs from his medicine pouch. Usha root for the lungs, sage for purification. Speaking to him in soft, soothing Comanche words of warmth and life, invoking protective spirits, he then turned to Rachel. He managed to get her to swallow a few sips of lukewarm water from his water-skin water he'd kept from freezing close to his body. The journey to his hidden, well-insulated cave, a place known only to him and a few elders of his band, was a brutal testament to his strength and knowledge. He half-carried, half-dragged Rachel Daniel bundled securely on his back. Finally, they reached the cave. It was small but dry and defensible. He quickly built a small, controlled fire, the smoke carefully vented. The warmth felt like a divine miracle. He laid them on thick furs. For days, his existence narrowed to their survival. He forced warm broth made from dried meat, wild onions, and potent mountain herbs between their cracked lips. He tended to Rachel's frostbitten hands and feet, applying poultices made from chewed willow bark for pain. Yarrow to staunch bleeding from her raw skin, and more bear grease, his touch surprisingly gentle. He held Daniel close to his own body for hours, sharing his warmth, whispering ancient chants, coaxing the boy's spirit back. He rarely slept, his vigil constant. He had to hunt too carefully, not wanting to leave them for long. Bringing back a lean rabbit or a ptarmigan, enough to sustain them, Rachel drifted in and out of consciousness. trapped in a horrifying labyrinth of fever dreams and agonizing lucidity. In her dreams, she saw Thomas's face blue, and still then overlaid with Eloise's triumphant smile. She heard Eloise's sharp voice, "Make sure it looks like an accident." The grief was a physical weight. She would weep silent, despairing tears freezing until Sahale gently wiped them away. He didn't offer empty platitudes. He simply sat with her. His presence a steady grounding force, he would place a warm stone wrapped in hide in her hands. Daniel, younger and more fiercely protected, began to recover more quickly. His weak whimpers turned into soft cries and then weak words. He clung to Sahale, his small frostbitten fingers gripping the warrior's buckskin shirt. He didn't understand the language, but he understood kindness, safety. He called him Tuhki Otou, Featherman, because of the single proud hawk feather Sahale always wore, braided into his long black hair. A feather, Sahale explained through gesture, and the few English words Rachel taught him was a gift from an elder, a symbol of clear vision. Slowly, painstakingly, Rachel began to mend. The physical wounds began to heal under Sahale's patient care. The deeper wounds and the loss of Thomas, the burning betrayal, those would take much longer. But the will to live, fanned by her surviving son, reasserted itself, and I could watch Sahale, this quiet, powerful man. He hunted for them, he kept the fire, he fashioned warmer clothes from treated animal skins, stitched with sinew, teaching her how to soften the hides. He taught her through gestures and a few shared words. Her broken English, his sparse attempts at her language supplemented by drawings in the cave dust. How to survive. He showed her which berries were safe, which roots medicinal. The mountain gives, the mountain takes. He told her one day, his gaze sweeping the rugged peaks visible from the cave mouth. One must learn its language, respect its spirit. It has no malice, only its own laws. Rachel found herself listening not just to his words, but to the silences between them, understanding a wisdom that went beyond language. Days turned into weeks, a timeless rhythm of survival and slow healing. In the evenings by the firelight, he would sometimes tell stories, ancient legends of his people, of courage, resilience, of the connection between all living things. Rachel, in turn, in halting sentences, would speak of her life, of Thomas's infectious laughter, of Daniel's mischievous grin. Before darkness fell, she spoke of the betrayal, the raw, gaping wound still festering. Sahale listened, his expression largely unchanging, but his eyes reflecting profound empathy. Once she asked him hesitantly about the old faded scar that traced a line from his temple to his jaw. He touched it lightly, a young bear. He said simply, "I was foolish then. It taught me respect." The shared vulnerability, however brief, forged another strand in their growing, unspoken bond. One day, as the first subtle signs of an approaching spring began to whisper, the constant drip of melting snow, the tentative song of a returning junco, Sahale looked at Rachel, his gaze direct. "Soon," he said, "soon you go back. The path down will be clear. The snows melt, rivers run full. Go back." The words sent a shiver through Rachel, a complex mixture of profound fear and a burgeoning fierce resolve. Go back to redemption. Go back to face Eloise. The thought was terrifying. But then she looked at Daniel, his cheeks now holding a touch of rosy color, his eyes bright, playing near the cave entrance with a small wooden carving of a wolf. Sahale had made for him a crude but treasured toy. She thought of Thomas buried beneath the indifferent snow justice. She owed it to Thomas. Her grief was afire now, not just of sorrow, but of righteous fury. "Yes," she said to Sahale, her voice stronger, "soon I go back." Sahale nodded, a rare, almost imperceptible smile touching the corners of his lips. "I go with you." He said simply, it was not a question. "The two-legged snake still has fangs. We will draw them." The journey down from the high country was slow, deliberate. The snow was melting rapidly, swelling rivers. the trails treacherous with mudslides. But Rachel hardened her body leaner, her spirit tempered by Sahale's unwavering presence, moved with new unyielding determination. Daniel, riding securely on Sahale's broad back, when the terrain was too difficult, chattered happily, pointing at new spring flowers. Sahale guided them with unerring instinct, teaching Rachel to read the signs of the land. As they descended, the air grew warmer, the landscape greener. Familiar landmarks of the valley below began to appear. Redemption. Fear, cold and sharp, tried to grip Rachel's heart, but she pushed it down. It was a bright spring morning when Rachel Holloway walked back into Redemption, holding Daniel by the hand, with Sahale proud and resolute at her side. Martha Periwinkle, the town's renowned gossip, was the first to see her. Her mouth fell open, clothespin dropping. She let out a shriek that could have woken the dead. People stopped. Conversations died. Mid-sentence. Heads turned. A ripple of stunned silence, then utter disbelieving astonishment. Rachel Holloway alive. And the boy? Little Daniel Jacob Holloway was in his office, poring over ledgers, his profits down, his spirit broken. The growing commotion outside, then a startled gasp from his clerk. The door burst open, and there she stood, Rachel. Not a ghost, but Rachel, flesh and blood. Thinner, her face etched with an experience he could not fathom, her eyes holding a chilling fire. Beside her, Daniel, and behind them, a tall, imposing Comanche warrior. His presence radiating quiet power, Jacob's world tilted violently. Rachel! He finally choked out his voice, a hoarse, incredulous whisper. Eloise, who had been preening before a small mirror, swept into the office, a crafted expression of wifely concern. "Jacob, darling, what is all the fuss?" Her words died. Her smile froze, then crumbled. Her eyes, wide with shock, landed on Rachel, then on Daniel. The color drained from her face. For a fleeting, terrible second, raw, unadulterated terror flashed in her eyes, quickly masked. Rachel, Daniel. Oh, thank God, it's a miracle. She rushed forward, arms outstretched. Do not touch them. Sahale's voice, deep and resonant, as a war drum, cut through the air like a whip. He moved almost imperceptibly, a silent, unmovable barrier. Eloise recoiled. Sheriff Brody, alerted by the commotion, pushed his way to the front, his hand instinctively on the butt of his Colt. Rachel misses. Holloway, what in tarnation is going on here? The sheriff demanded, his sharp gaze shifting from Rachel to Eloise's rapidly fraying facade, then to Sahale. Your story, Miss Goodwin. Brody continued, his voice flat and hard. Has always had gaps, holes big enough to drive a wagon through. A she-bear that selectively attacks and then vanishes like smoke. You surviving with nary a deep scratch, while a grown woman and 2 children perish. The terrain up there is rough, yes, but you're hired guides. Kane and Cody, not exactly known for their careful shepherding, are they? More like wolves themselves, from what I hear. There was no bear, Sheriff. Rachel said, her voice clear and strong, ringing with undeniable truth. There was no accident. We were drugged, Daniel and I, and Thomas drugged with that cider Eloise so kindly pressed upon us, laced with laudanum, I'd wager, and then abandoned in a blizzard to die. Her eyes burning with the memory of her lost son locked onto Eloise, by her, so she could have it all. A collective gasp from the crowd pressing in, Eloise laughed, a high-pitched, unnatural sound, on the verge of hysteria. She's mad delirious, grief has turned her mind. Jacob, tell them. Tell them she doesn't know what she's saying. She turned to Jacob, her eyes pleading, but Jacob was staring at Rachel, at the haunted, knowing look in her eyes, at Daniel, his son, miraculously alive. He looked at the imposing Comanche. Doubt, a terrible, sickening doubt, began to take root in his mind. Rachel. He finally managed, his voice trembling. You always said her ambition felt predatory. I wouldn't listen. I was a fool. What are you saying? I'm saying, Rachel continued, her voice gathering strength, that Eloise Goodwin, with the help of 2 hired men, one of whom, Cain, was a man you recommended Jacob on her insistent advice, took my children and me into the mountains under false pretenses. She drugged us and left us to die in the snow. She wanted us gone. She wanted the ranch. She wanted my life. Perhaps, Rachel added, her voice dropping slightly. She was even settling an old family score, an ancient grudge her grandfather carried against the Holloway name. Eloise flinched, a subtle but telling recoil, as if struck. Suddenly a commotion erupted at the back. Cain, his jagged scar livid against his pale skin, tried to slip away. Sahale, his senses preternaturally alert, moved with lightning speed, a blur of motion. Before Cain could take more than 2 steps, Sahale was on him, a long, wickedly sharp hunting knife appearing as if by magic in his hand, its point pressing against Cain's grimy throat. This one. Sahale grunted, his voice a low growl. This is one of the dogs sent to finish the hunt. He failed his mistress. Sheriff Silas Blackwood. The horse trader yelled, pushing his way forward, his face alight with shocked recognition and a distinct tremor in his voice. That's him. That's the very man. I saw him, Sheriff, days before you found the lodge, empty, leading pack horses up the old north trail towards the Wolf Paw. Looked like he was avoiding the main routes for sure. He had these heavy, canvas-wrapped bundles on the horses strapped down tight. It gave me a proper turn, Sheriff. It truly did. Looked like folks unwell, maybe worse, a woman's shape and 2 small ones. I tried to ask, but he just snarled at me, waved me off real aggressive-like, said they were indisposed family heading for a quiet cure. Indisposed, that piebald mare he rode. There's no mistaking her, I'd swear to it on a stack of Bibles. Daniel, who had been quiet, clinging to his mother, suddenly emboldened by Sahale's decisive action, pointed a small, trembling finger at Eloise. She gave us sleepy juice. He said, his childlike voice, but firm, cutting through the rising clamor. In the cabin, said it was special mountain honey. Then it was cold, so cold. He shivered violently. Tommy got too cold. He wouldn't wake up. Then I woke up wrapped in furs with Featherman. He looked up at Sahale, a small, trusting smile. Featherman made fire. Featherman saved us. The child's simple, direct testimony was utterly devastating. Sheriff, a nervous young man, Ben the rider Eloise had dispatched, pushed forward, his Adam's apple bobbing. Sheriff Brody, I got something when Miss Goodwin hired me to take that message to Mr. Holloway, the one about the bear. She gave me this extra letter sealed tight, told me to hold it and post it from Redemption only if anything went awry with her original plans, or if too many awkward questions were asked. Said it was insurance for a business partner in St. Louis who was expecting news about a land consolidation deal dependent on Mr. Holloway being unencumbered. It seemed. Well, mighty peculiar, Sheriff. I didn't post it. Got a real bad feeling about the whole business, here being too calm, too practiced for someone who just escaped a bear. He produced the envelope, its wax seal unbroken. Brody took it, one eyebrow arching high, at Eloise. Land consolidation, Miss Goodwin. And unencumbered, you say? Sounds less like grief and more like meticulously planned acquisition. The letter, later opened in front of witnesses, would detail Eloise's arrangements for the swift sale of key Holloway Ranch assets, once she had inherited full control, through Jacob confirming a level of cold-blooded premeditation that shocked even the hardened sheriff and several stoic townsmen. Sheriff Brody turned his steely gaze, now devoid of any lingering doubt, to the terrified, still restrained Cain. You were up there with her and another man? The one called Cody. What happened to your partner? Cain, his eyes wide with terror, seeing the noose tightening, spat. Cody, that damn fool, He slipped on an ice-slicked ledge in the storm trying to get back to the lodge after we left him, went clean over the side, screaming like a stuck pig. Broke his neck, I reckon, served him right, clumsy oaf. Left me to handle things and face the music alone, if it came to it, the coward. His callous admission, crass and self-serving, sealed his fate. Eloise saw her meticulously constructed world shatter into a million irreparable pieces, the bravado, the defiance. It all drained away. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. She whimpered, tears, real tears, this time of fear and abject self-pity streaming down her face, ruining her carefully applied makeup. They were just supposed to take them away, far away. Scare them off for good, make them disappear, leave the territory, not kill them. He promised it wouldn't come to that. But they almost did die, Eloise. Rachel said, her voice cold as the mountain snow that had nearly been her grave. My Thomas did die. The raw, unadulterated grief in her voice. The simple statement of horrific fact silenced everyone. The full monstrous horror of Eloise's actions settled upon the room with suffocating weight. Then, as if her composure finally snapped, Eloise's eyes, viperous and filled with a desperate, cornered fury, fixed on Rachel. You Holloways. She shrieked, her voice cracking. My grandfather, he told me stories. He told me how your precious Jedediah Holloway, that sanctimonious old thief, built his empire on the ruins of other good men's lives, men like him. He died a broken, impoverished man because of your family's greed and ruthlessness. You all deserved. Her hate-filled confession, a confirmation of Rachel's suspicion, hung in the air, damning her utterly. Then, in a final desperate gambit, a glint of metal flashed in her hand. From a hidden pocket in her voluminous skirt, Eloise drew a small pearl-handled Derringer pistol, aiming it wildly first at Rachel, then shifting her crazed gaze towards Daniel. You won't take this from me. I won't go back to nothing. Before Jacob or Sheriff Brody, both momentarily stunned, could react, Sahale moved again. Not towards Eloise, not directly engaging the firearm. With a flick of his powerful wrist, the empty, hardened leather waterskin he still carried from their journey looped through the air with astonishing speed and accuracy, striking Eloise's gun hand with a sharp thwack. The Derringer clattered harmlessly to the wooden floor. Sahale then calmly retrieved his knife from the now whimpering Kane, whom Sheriff Brody's arriving deputy quickly and roughly subdued. It's over, Eloise. Sheriff Brody said, his voice hard and unforgiving. As he snapped handcuffs onto her slender wrists, he picked up the Derringer. Eloise Goodwin, I am arresting you for the attempted murder of Rachel Holloway and Daniel Holloway, and for conspiracy leading to the death of Thomas Holloway. You have the right to remain silent. Eloise didn't scream then. She seemed to have shrunk all her ambition, her cunning reduced to a pathetic sniveling heap. Her future was a bleak landscape of prison bars. Kane, sputtering, was hauled away alongside her. The wolves were caught as the sheriff led Eloise away. It felt profound exhaustion. Jacob finally moved his face, a mask of revulsion and dawning terrible understanding. Thomas. Because of her? Because of me? He whispered. He walked towards Rachel's steps, hesitant. Rachel, I am so sorry. There are no words. I was a fool. A blind, arrogant, pathetic fool. Can you ever... We will talk later, Jacob. Rachel said quietly, her voice devoid of warmth, but not entirely of pity. Her heart was too numb, too raw. For now her focus was justice for Thomas and Daniel. She turned to Sahale, her eyes conveying a gratitude too deep for words. He had not only saved their lives, he had given her the strength to reclaim them. He met her gaze, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of warmth, of something akin to a warrior's acknowledging smile in his dark, intense eyes. The days that followed were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, official statements, and painful readjustments, Rachel, with Daniel by her side, moved back into the Holloway ranch house. It felt strange, alien, haunted by recent memories of Eloise's corrosive presence and the terrible echoes of her loss, yet it was her home. Daniel's birthright, Jacob, humbled and utterly contrite, offered her everything. His unwavering support, his undying remorse, the ranch itself. If she wanted it free and clear, Rachel accepted his help in practical matters for Daniel's sake, and for the sake of the ranch that was her son's legacy. But the trust, the intimacy was shattered. She found she had to learn the complex ledgers herself, cross-referencing Jacob's entries with invoices and bank statements, uncovering further evidence of Eloise's systematic siphoning of funds disguised as ranch expenses, clearly diverted for her own schemes, including substantial payments to Cain and Cody. This discovery, sickening as it was, hardened her resolve to master every aspect of their legacy, to protect it for Daniel with a vigilance born of bitter experience. The town of Redemption, once so quick to believe Eloise's lies, now showered Rachel with awkward support and genuine sympathy. Ashamed of their gullibility, Sahale did not leave. He had said he would go with her, and he stayed a quiet, unobtrusive guardian. He set up a small traditional wickiup on the edge of the Holloway land near the Whispering River, a place that reminded him, he told Rachel, of the high mountain valleys. He helped with the ranch work, his skills with horses, his knowledge of the land, and its moods proving invaluable. He taught Daniel how to track animals, how to identify edible plants, how to read the stars, how to listen to the whispers of the wind. A warrior listens more than he speaks, little hawk. Sahale would tell the boy, often ruffling his hair. The land holds all stories, all truths, all medicines, if you know how to hear them and see them. Daniel, in turn, would proudly show Rachel a new skill, like the small, effective bird trap Sahale had taught him to make, or how to identify the call of a distant coyote. For Rachel, Sahale's continued presence was more complex, a quiet comfort she hadn't realized she needed. He was her savior, her protector. There was a bond between them, forged in shared trauma and silent understanding. He spoke of the great spirit of the balance in all things, of finding strength in adversity. Even the hardest winter, he told her one evening as they watched the river, gives way to spring. The fallen tree nourishes new growth. Sorrow can carve space for new strength if the heart allows it to heal, not to harden. The trial of Eloise Goodwin and Jedediah Cain was swift and decisive, faced with overwhelming evidence. Rachel's unshakable testimony, Daniel's innocent corroboration, Silas Blackwood's agitated account. Onto the damning contents of Ben the writer's letter, detailing Eloise's contingency plan for selling off assets, coupled with Eloise's partial confession and Cain's admissions. They were found guilty. The judge, a stern man with little tolerance for calculated cruelty, citing the heinous nature of their crimes. And the tragic, senseless death of young Thomas sentenced Eloise to life imprisonment in the territorial penitentiary. With no possibility of parole, Cain was sentenced to hang by the neck until dead. As Eloise was led away, her beauty faded to a gaunt, bitter mask. She was a stark reminder of how ambition unchecked by conscience could curdle into monstrous evil. With Eloise gone and Cain meeting his deserved fate, a semblance of normalcy, fragile yet persistent, began to return. Rachel threw herself into the work, learning the business side from Jacob's ledgers, proving as capable and determined as her late father-in-law. Daniel thrived, his laughter once again echoing, though the shadow of his ordeal, the memory of his lost brother, would always be a part of him. He often woke with nightmares, and it was often Sahale, not Jacob, whom he called for Sahale, who would sit with him murmuring soft Comanche words until he slept again. Jacob watched Rachel, his heart filled with a painful mixture of immense pride and a deep, abiding, soul-searing regret. He knew he had failed her, failed his sons. She preyed on my ego, Rachel. He confessed one quiet evening, his voice choked with emotion, on my foolish desire to feel vital young again. My vanity, my blindness. It cost Thomas his life. That's a debt I can never repay. Vanity is a poor compass, Jacob. She said, her voice quiet but firm. As is vengeance, she added, thinking of Eloise's twisted motivations. I don't know if I can ever truly forgive what your blindness allowed. Forgetting is impossible, but Daniel needs his father, at least in some capacity. We will have to find a way for that for his sake. As the seasons turned from the vibrant rebirth of spring to the full heat of summer, then to the golden, melancholic hues of autumn, Rachel found a new rhythm. The pain of Thomas's loss remained a dull, constant ache, but it was now interwoven with a fierce determination to live fully, to honor his memory by embracing life. The following spring, when the first bluebonnets and Indian paintbrushes painted the meadows in vibrant swathes of color, Rachel, with Daniel and Sahale beside her, planted a young aspen sapling on a small rise overlooking the valley, a place where Thomas had loved to sit with his whittling and imagine grand adventures among the distant peaks. Daniel carefully placed a circle of smooth river stones around its tender base. For you, my brave, curious Thomas. Rachel whispered, her hand lingering on the slender, smooth trunk, its nascent leaves trembling in the warm breeze like tiny prayers. May you always see the sky from here, and may this tree grow strong and tall, a living testament that life endures, and love is never truly lost. Sahale, his expression solemn, added a single perfect hawk feather, tying it loosely to a young branch with a thin strip of sinew. May its spirit be strong. He said softly in Comanche, then translated, like the boys, may it touch the clouds for him. One crisp autumn evening, as the sun dipped below the western horizon, painting the sky in fiery colors that mirrored the changing leaves, Rachel stood with Sahale, watching Daniel, now a little older, a little stronger, skip stones across the placid surface of the river, his joyful shouts echoing in the twilight. A sense of peace, deep and profound, settled over her, a peace she had thought lost forever. She had been to the brink of death, had lost so much, but she had survived. She had found justice, and in the most unexpected of places, in the quiet, unwavering strength of a Comanche warrior, she had found a connection that nourished her soul. You don't have to stay, you know, she said softly, her gaze still on the river, though her words were for him. You have your own life, your own people, your own path to follow. We are safe now. Sahale turned to her, his dark, knowing eyes holding hers. My path led me to you and the boy Wachanga. He said, his voice calm, certain, using the Comanche name, Strong Woman. He had quietly bestowed upon her a name that resonated more with each passing day. He'd explained Strong Woman was not just about surviving the cold, but about the enduring fire in her spirit that refused to be extinguished by grief or betrayal. For now, for as long as the Great Spirit wills it, this is where my path lies. He looked towards Daniel, a rare softness, almost paternal in his stern expression. He is Pihimia, like a son to my heart. He learns the old ways, the ways of listening to the earth, and his spirit grows strong and straight, like a young cedar reaching for the sun. He needs guidance. And you? He paused, searching for the precise words in her tongue, his gaze softening further. You are sister friend. Your heart is strong like the mountain eagle that soars above the storm, scarred perhaps by lightning, but still holding true to its journey towards the sun, never giving up its sky. A warmth spread through Rachel, a feeling of belonging, of being truly seen, truly understood in a way she had never been before. She had reclaimed her life, her home, but she had also found something new, something unexpected and infinitely precious. A new kind of family, perhaps forged in the crucible of unimaginable hardship, bound by loyalty, respect, and a shared journey from the deepest darkness into an emergent light. She reached out and gently, impulsively touched his arm, the worn buckskin soft beneath her fingers. "Thank you, Sahale." She whispered the simple words, carrying the weight of her entire being, her gratitude for his saving them, for his wisdom, for his unwavering presence, for everything. He simply nodded his gaze, returning to the river, to the boy, to the land that had, in its own harsh, inscrutable way, brought them all together. The wind whispered through the cottonwoods, carrying the scent of pine and distant early snow, a reminder of the trials they had endured, but also of the enduring, unyielding strength of the human spirit, and the unexpected grace that could be found even in the deepest, most terrifying shadows. Rachel Holloway had been abandoned, left for dead, but she had returned stronger, wiser. Her life irrevocably changed, but hers to live fully and bravely with her son by her side and a warrior's unwavering presence. A steadfast shield against the uncertainties of the wild, untamed West. The future was unwritten, a blank page, but for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Rachel Holloway faced it not with fear, but with a quiet, resilient, hard-won hope. And Sahale, the man who had found her beneath the snow, and the man who embodied the untamed spirit of the mountains that had almost claimed her, became an inseparable part of her and Daniel's life. Their stories forever intertwined, a testament to survival, to justice, and to the enduring elemental power of human connection in a world that was often as harsh as it was achingly beautiful. The Holloway Ranch would continue not just as a legacy of land and cattle, but as a place where courage was reborn daily, and where the most unlikely of bonds could forge a future brighter and more profound than any of them could have imagined. In the desolate depths of that terrible transformative winter, end of revised file 8 Tukst.